Well, good morning. My name's Joel Harden. Bonjour tout le monde. Mon nom est Joel Harden. Je suis le député au niveau provincial pour d'Ottawa Centre. I'm the member of provincial parliament for Ottawa Centre and proud to be the transit critic for the province of Ontario. We're talking about transit this morning because our city back in Ottawa is facing a 10% service cut, a reduction of $47 million, and 117 buses potentially being taken off the road if the province doesn't get into the business, as it has done historically, of funding transit again and not wasting money on wasteful public-private partnership, further ventures, and consultants. That's just the Ottawa picture. But I want to make sure we also start in a good way. I want to hand the microphone to my good friend, Jill Andrew, MP for Toronto St. Paul, so we can just acknowledge the land we're on and proceed in a good way this morning. So over to you, Jill.
Thank you and good morning. I'm Jill Andrew, the MPP for Toronto St. Paul's, and I want to acknowledge that the City of Toronto is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We are on Indigenous land. We are honored to work and to serve the province on Indigenous land, and we must be committed to our ideals of truth and reconciliation. My message is simple to the Ford government. The government must increase operating funding for public transit instead of the more wasteful P3 sweetheart deals to its private developer buddies, private consultants, private consortiums, and contractors. Premier Doug Ford is driving our public transit into the ground, and we are here to stop this today. His reliance on P3s is an offense to public workers' safety and their employment. It is an attack against public transit riders worried about the proposed 9% service reduction, which will amount to ridership decline. And it is an affront to our community on Eglinton that's had to live through over 12 years of noise pollution, where many workers and families have told me that they have not had a sleep-filled night or day in many years. The Ford government has allowed the Eglinton Crosstown LRT to be $1 billion over budget and 2 years delayed and counting, all while making Phil Vester, the CEO of the government agency Metrolinx, a millionaire with a practically $1 million salary. At the heights of COVID, when our small businesses across Ontario, including our very own Little Jamaica and Midtown, have been forced to close in many cases, workers were losing hours and in too many cases losing jobs because they were homesick without paid sick days due to the Ford government. All this while Ford gave $1 billion to businesses, quite frankly, not even eligible for COVID relief. And get this, over $210 million of those dollars went to businesses that weren't even located in Ontario. Don't take it from me, though. Take it from the government, from the Attorney General, the Auditor General of Ontario, Bonnie Lysyk, an independent, and I stress independent officer of the legislature that creates independent audits of the Ontario provincial government's operations. The same Auditor General who in 2014 reviewed 74 P3 projects and concluded that they cost the province $8 billion more than if they had been procured publicly. In summary, P3s use public dollars to subsidize private, profit-driven corporations in the building of public infrastructure while subtracting fundamental principles of public service delivery, such as the public's right to transparency and accountability, public ownership, public safety, public jobs for public workers, and public return for public investment. Ontario's Auditor General warned the Ford government and, frankly, the previous Liberal government about the higher costs associated with P3s, but they kept depending on P3s, a hallmark model for going over budget, riddled with safety concerns, meager oversight, and, of course, chronic delays on delivery. Why wouldn't governments listen, you may ask? Because P3s allow politicians to provide now and pay later. They're essentially renting to own. They provide the illusion of service to voters and users to gain political credit during their term, while deferring the ballooning costs and headaches of chronic delays to future politicians, future voters, future vulnerable communities, and users. It's Deception 101, and frankly, exactly what we have come to be used to by this Ford government. Well, the buck stops here. I'm joined by everyone today, including people like Dane Williams, co-founder and director of Partnerships for Black Urbanism TO, serving our St. Paul's community. We're all fed up and want to see this government invest public dollars into public infrastructure, public dollars into public transit, public jobs, so our residents, our communities, our workers, our transit riders, and our small businesses can thrive. And I want to say, as a resident of St. Paul's, I see the impact every single day on our residents, on our workers, on our seniors, on our families, simply trying to get from point A to point B. And it's got to stop now. The Ford government has a responsibility to deliver and to answer to our questions. We deserve respect, we deserve accountability, and absolutely we deserve transparency. Thank you very much. Passing it back to Joel.
So we are very lucky. We are very, very lucky to have good friends with us today. Dane's already been mentioned, and Dane will be up shortly to talk about the impact of the Eglinton Crosstown on Little Jamaica and the Toronto St. Paul's community. But we are very, very fortunate to have the people who understand how transit works in this city of Toronto. The Amalgamated Transit Workers Union, the people who operate and fix the buses, fix the trains, fix the projects. Marvin Alfred, president of ATU 113. I'd love to share the stage with you, my friend. We also have with us Eric Tuck, vice president of ATU Canada, and Brian Connolly, who's a member of the executive board of ATU 113. Good morning, gentlemen. And Marvin, over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody. My name is Marvin Alfred, president of ATU Local 113, representing almost 12,000 transit workers here in Toronto. As an executive board, we have tremendous concerns with what's going on regarding the P3 model. We have a problem where there's a lack of transparency, a lack of oversight with what's going on. You have public dollars being diverted into private interests, private interests that are more concerned with trying to put their profits ahead of service, put their profits ahead of safety. This is an issue for us here in Toronto. And right now, with what's going on even in the city, we can't even get debates on what's going on regarding service cuts or what's going on in the public's interest. This needs to be eliminated and have the private interest not be the most important part of this equation. We have private interests that are more concerned with trying to invest themselves and invest in the city. We have jobs that are disappearing. We need opportunities for maintenance. We need opportunities for operations to be maintained in the public sector. But that's not the motivation of the private interests. Why is there an issue for these P3s to have oversight? Why is it an issue for the provincial government to not be championing transparency for the public dollars that they're spending? This needs to be eliminated, and we need the city, and we need the province, and the citizens of the city, and the province and the citizens of the province to be able to stand up and hold these provincial MPPs accountable in order to have this transparency maintained. This needs to stop, and we need an opportunity for people to be heard. If they do not want to be transparent, then this needs to be dealt with. Thank you.
Dane Williams, over to you. And thank you for joining.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dane Williams with Black Urbanism Toronto. I first want to thank you for allowing me to be here today to discuss the pressing issue of Metrolinx neglect and its devastating effects on small Black business owners in Little Jamaica. I am still deeply troubled by the stories I've heard from community members and business owners who have been impacted by the Eglinton Crosstown LRT project. Small business owners are the backbone of our economy, providing jobs, supporting our communities, and delivering the goods and services we need to live and flourish. Yet these business owners have been pushed to the brink, and many have been forced to close their doors because of Metrolinx's irresponsibility. The roadblocks, debris blocking access to businesses, and lack of parking for patrons are just a few of the challenges business owners have faced over the past decade plus. This has led to the closure of over 140 Black businesses and counting along Eglinton West, and has caused an immense suffering to countless other small business owners in the area. How can we allow this to happen in a system that is supposed to support our small business owners? I stand before you today calling for a change in policy. We must make sure that small business owners are not ignored and forgotten in the rush to build infrastructure projects like the Eglinton Crosstown LRT. We need a policy change that creates a fairer economy for our small businesses, one that recognizes their value and ensures that their livelihood are protected and not destroyed. To achieve this, there needs to be an implementation of compensation for small business owners who have been impacted by LRT construction until the projects have been completed. This would not only provide support for the affected business owners, but would provide a more equitable and accountable system for LRT construction projects that business owners are no longer seen as collateral damage in projects with no end in sight. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm looking at the clock this morning. We have lots of time left in our half-hour slot. And a perspective we haven't heard yet is a rider perspective. So sorry to put our friends from TTC Riders on the spot, but I see Sheila and August with us this morning. Is there anything you'd like to add as you listen to what folks have been saying this morning? August, thank you. And thanks for being with us.
Hi, I'm August. I'm from TTC Riders. We're a membership-based organization advocating for transit riders in the city of Toronto. So the TTC is facing service cuts of 9% across the system compared to pre-pandemic levels and up to 25% across the subway system. Service cuts mean less safety. Service cuts mean, being late to work, being late to school. And without more funding, the TTC resources are strained to operate new lines like the Eglinton Crosstown and Finch West on top of the existing transit system. The provincial government has been expanding rapid transit, but they need to provide stable operations funding to also operate our expanding transit system. The province should provide a 50% operating subsidy to the TTC as they once did before. The Crosstown is over budget and delayed, as we've heard. Torontonians have been waiting for over a decade for the line to open, which is now 3 years delayed and over $1 billion over budget. According to leaked Metrolinx documents, there has been no clear date to when Eglinton Crosstown will open. When the province took over rapid transit expansion, the new private-public P3 model was touted to bring costs down and reduce delays, but it's done the complete opposite. Taking away local control and contracting out transit projects is making projects just more expensive and, ripe with delay. Public-private partnerships in transit are less transparent and accountable. Just look at the Presto card, which is a P3 between Metrolinx and Accenture. Metrolinx signed an exclusive contract with Shoppers Drug Mart, which limits to where Presto cards are sold just at Shoppers and at subway stations. We also know that 5.25% of every TTC fare goes to Presto. When the TTC wants a change made to Presto, it takes time and money. Transit users should have confidence in the safety of our public transit system, but some of the same companies responsible for Ottawa's LRT derailments, which reduce inadequate maintenance, have a 30-year contract with the Eglinton Crosstown. Everyone understands the importance of building new transit, but the lack of transparency around the Eglinton Crosstown is undermining confidence in Metrolinx at a time when they are building so many transit projects across our city that we will be depending on in the next few years. Transit riders deserve answers about when the Crosstown will open and what the holdup is, and whether there are interim solutions. Transit users should have trust and confidence in Metrolinx, and that they are making evidence-based decisions and considering impacts, especially on racialized low-income communities. We need to keep transit public and accountable. Thank you.
We are a passionate and efficient crowd this morning, so we have some time on the clock. And what I'd like to do is pass the microphone back to Marvin, if he's all right with it. We have a lesson already in what not to do in public transit projects. And sadly, it comes from my home city of Ottawa, the Ottawa LRT, the Inquirer report. Marvin, did you have any thoughts with respect to what Toronto shouldn't follow? With all due love and respect to my city.
Of course. I think we've got an example as to what's going on in Ottawa and not to happen in Toronto. There's already a template as to what not to do in Ottawa, and they're bringing it to Toronto with no accountability. And that's why transparency matters. That's why if what's happening in Ottawa is happening to detrimental of the public interest, they're bringing it to Toronto and they do not want any oversight. This is what we're trying to have addressed. For example, what's going on with the Up Express. You had an issue regarding service. You had an issue regarding brakes. I think it's 14 of 18 vehicles that have been condemned and not allowed to be back in service. Now they have to find supplemental service, which is at a cost to this, the citizens of Toronto, and you're being denied service that you're paid for. Overall, these are the things that are happening without any scrutiny, without any oversight, and not allowing the public's interest to be able to be the most dominant factor of what's going on. What is happening in Ottawa, and why are they not allowing people to have insight into what's going on? This is a model that's happening, and they're trying to move it to Toronto, and that's why we're very concerned with what's going on regarding Toronto Transit, whether it's through the Crosstown or whether it's the TTC or any other interest. There needs to be oversight and scrutiny, and the public to be able to have some sort of voice as to what's going on. When that voice is denied, people are concerned what's happening in the back rooms and what kind of deals are happening in the private interest as opposed to the public interest. Transit needs real solutions for service and real solutions for safety. It takes real investment. It takes real solutions. And we're not getting these solutions if we don't have transparency and allowing the public to be able to be involved in what's going on. So again, we're trying to eliminate what's happening in Ottawa coming to Toronto. And we have that opportunity with public oversight. And you're investing public dollars, there should be public oversight. I just want to make sure I reinforce that point. Thank you.
So for the benefit of the recording too, MPP Andrew and I held a transit town hall between our two cities on January 26th, and all the folks you've heard this morning and more spoke about what was happening because we keep funneling money into these failing public-private partnership consultants. I want to name one before throwing open to see if there's anybody who wanted to add anything. I know Eric Tuck's here, who speaks for ATU Canada, Brian Connolly. We have a lot of expertise in this room. We should use it before 10 o'clock is here. But I want to talk for a moment about Brian Guest and Boxfish, which was one of the consultants behind the failed Ottawa LRT project, who we found out last January was also a vice president of Metrolinx. I wonder later this morning when Mr. Verster is before the Empire Club if he's going to be talking about the fact that this gentleman was fired, that the Eglinton Crosstown, as Dane, as Marvin, as others have said, is well behind budget. But these consultants keep getting paid. They keep getting paid with public dollars. Minister Carolyn Mulroney of Transportation said that this matter was going to be investigated. And Jill and I have not heard about any investigation about Mr. Guest, any investigation of the cost overruns. And this is public money we're wasting at a time when we're cutting service, we're cutting jobs, we're cutting buses. This is not what the public needs. Eric, is there anything you wanted to say from the national perspective from the union? And thank you, Eric Tuck, for being here.
Thanks, Joel. I want to thank you for bringing this important issue to the forefront. The reality is P3s, time and time again, have proven that they are just a way to funnel money to private companies. They do not work. Public transit has been running transit across this country for many, many years. In fact, right here in Toronto, we know in the early 40s, there was a different P3. It was the three public service governments. Whether it was the federal government, the provincial government, or the municipal government, they came together because they recognized the need to build public transit. It was an equity issue, just the same as they recognized building public health care and public education. Anytime you're going into a P3 model, that is a privatized model. It is a way to funnel money into private companies. And we have proven time and time again, whether you look at Ottawa, where the wheels are literally coming off the trains, or here in Toronto with the ups, with the brake linings cracked, time and time again, the privatized companies have run their service into the ground, and public transit has proven to be a safe, reliable deliverer of public transit. That's why we need to, like our forefathers did, invest in public transit, invest in public services, whether it's healthcare, education. The best way to do it is to do it ourselves and make sure it's done right. Make sure that we actually are able to, for the future, provide the transportation that is needed across this country. Thank you.
Brian Connolly, is there anything you want to add? And just for people tuning in, you're about to get a taste of one of our resident subject matter experts. Come on up here, Brian. Brian leads the maintenance division of ATU 113, if I got that correct for the exec board.
Hello. I'd like to discuss the P3 model that funnels public money into private corporations with no accountability for maintenance on any project. Prime example is the Ottawa Confederation Line LRT that had 2 train derailments. They've had the wheels and bearings come off their trains, a gearbox fall out of their train, and the system is only 2 years old when all this was happening. It was taken out of service for 3 months. Since then, they've had wires come down due to icing, which caused a 6-day shutdown of the LRT. Most recently, here in Toronto, we had the UP Express that was taken out of service when the trains were condemned because of lack of maintenance, because the brake rotors were cracked. Now we have the Eglinton Crosstown. The Eglinton Crosstown is 2.5 years delayed and no answers about any of these P3 models for transportation and transit. The problem with the government using public money for private profit is there's no accountability and no answers. The same maintenance companies that are in the Ottawa LRT are now with the Eglinton Crosstown for 30 years. We also look at Alstom, the main maintenance company in Ottawa and also in the Eglinton Crosstown is also the maintenance company for the UP Express. So as you can see, there is no accountability to the public. There is waste of money, and you've never seen the TTC subway shut down for 6 days, let alone 6 hours. And when councillors demand answers, demand accountability, they get the answers. Here in Toronto, Councillor Josh Matlow and Mike Cole asked Metrolinx to come to City Council, and they refused. They cannot get any answers as to delays into the Eglinton Crosstown. It's time the public demands the answers and demand for a public inquiry. Thank you.
Well, look, I'm just going to call up Jill to help us send this off in a good way. And Jill, I want to also just acknowledge we have a report from our event on January 26th, and Jill was a major reason we had the kind of people, the great people who are here today, who are here with us on January 26th. Jill, over to you and Dave for ending us in a good way.
Thank you so much. So what we've heard here is we need public dollars to fund our public transit. We need a government that is transparent. The Doug Ford government is not currently being transparent. They're being quite opaque with the Eglinton Crosstown LRT, a project that has taken way too long and has impacted our lives. I want to make it clear, and I know that Dane from Black Urbanism TO, others from Reclaim Eglinton West, and our fabulous BIAs along Eglinton. Shout out to Fairbanks, shout out to York Eglinton BIA, Midtown Mount Pleasant BIA. Folks are trying their best, but I want to make it clear that we've seen over 140 Black businesses close in Little Jamaica. We've seen many businesses close in Midtown. We've seen people have to pick up and leave our community in St. Paul's because of the impact of this ongoing decade and years, 13 years, 12 years long project. It is time we get answers from Minister Mulrooney, from Premier Ford, from Minister Surma, from the people who sing the praises of P3 models. Even though, as I said, our Auditor General, transit advocates and leaders, communities, researchers, academics, everyone has flagged the concerns we have with P3 models. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. My colleague and I, we've stood in the House demanding small business supports. We've demanded safe and healthy workplaces for all workers, including our public transit workers. And these calls have been denied. And most importantly, we've called for a public inquiry into this P3 scandal because we don't want to see it happen anywhere else. We certainly have worries about Ontario Line, but I'll leave that for another day. So I want to thank everyone who has spoken today, who's speaking up for every transit user, for every transit rider, for every transit operator, and for the small business owners and residents of our communities in Ottawa and in Ontario, obviously, in Toronto, in St. Paul's, for everyone who needs to get from point A to B on our transit. Thank you very much for tuning in today.
All right, thanks for joining us. And for those who are still watching the last fragments of this press conference, know that we have a report for January 26th, and we're going to be distributing that. And again, thank you so much to MPP Andrew, to all the folks who are here. And for government, get ready. If you're only going to be doing press conferences at the Empire Club on transit, you're not going to get an easy ride in the House. We expect answers. Okay, thanks for joining us this morning. Be well.